But in Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45, we are to understand it in a spiritual sense. And so if we are to understand in a spiritual sense, it means that events surrounding Daniel 11, verse 45, should be understood how? Spiritually and not naturally, all literal. So, I don't know which part of invention which says that spiritual things are spiritually discerned and natural things are naturally. So spiritual things are spiritually discerned and natural things are naturally discerned. So whatever happened between Daniel 11, verse 1 to 39, will be repeated here at the end of the world through the study of Daniel 11, 40 to 45. And another principle which I was taught when I was new in this movement, which I hope everyone was taught, is that of Isaiah 46:10. Isaiah 46, verse 10. God declares the end from the beginning. So, for us to understand the Omega's history, we go where? We go to Alpha history. And so, in this study, what I'll be doing, I'll go back to the Alpha, king of the north, in connection to religion and Sunday law message. Are we together? Yes. So, if God declared the end from the beginning, and the end is Daniel 11, 1 to 39, that is the Alpha history. Therefore, I'll also compare Daniel 2 and Daniel 11. This means the same thing. What do I mean? In the Alpha history of the king of the north, I know we have, the Bible brings out other, how can I put it? Okay, if you go to Daniel, Daniel brings Babylon as the first king of the north according to Bible prophecy. But I understand that Babylon is not the only king of the north or the first king of the north. Before Babylon, we had the king of the north. But because I'm dealing with Alpha and Omega, so in Daniel chapter 2, what Daniel gives us in Daniel chapter 2 is the king of the north, and that is Babylon. And Daniel chapter 11, we're going to deal with the king of the north, which is USA. I'll put it in quotes. Yes. So what we have said, the theme of the camp, we have understood it to be the people are kept together by the bond of union, which is parable methodology that brings people together in 1989, and we are required to advance, and we advance with the advancing truth. So if we begin to look at Daniel 2, so this is Daniel 2, we begin with Babylon. We have Medo-Persia, we have Greece, we have Rome in two phases. One, and 2, second Rome and third Rome. So Babylon became all this. This is the king of the north. The entire of Daniel chapter 2 deals with this issue of these kingdoms conquering and becoming the king of the north. So in this history, for one to become the king of the north, what happens? You conquer. So we don't assume that it was a vacuum. Can you conquer vacuum? So then it means that something was before Babylon. For Babylon to become the king of the north, it must have conquered whatever entity that was there for it to become the king of the north. So Babylon conquers this entity, I'm calling XYZ, and becomes the king of the north. Medo-Persia conquers Babylon and becomes what? Takes the crown of Babylon as the king of the north and becomes what? The king of the north. The same. Greece conquers Medo-Persia, Rome conquers Greece and becomes the king of the north. So my study, basically, I'll be dealing with Daniel 11, 40 to 45. But before we go to Daniel 11, 40 to 45, what does inspiration tell us? This one, look up. Here you use your eyes. What does it tell us? So God declares the end from the beginning. So what should we do? We go to the beginning for us to understand what? The end. And that is what I'm dealing with. So I want us to read a quote, SBP 50.1. It's titled The Last Years of Babylonian what? Who is there? Can we please use our gadgets if you have it? I usually encourage people in my class, when it is a Bible verse reading, open. When it's a quote, you do what? You open. We're reading SBP 6.1, and so I'm going to read for the interest of time. The history of Babylonian nation reveals to the one who searches for hidden principles all that is necessary in order to understand the relation of earthly governments to God and the dealings of God with all the nations of the earth. So, sorry? It is in the blue estates. Oh, sorry. Sorry. It's in the blue estate. Yeah. You have it. Or if you don't have it, you can just listen. There's no problem. So this is Haskell, Stephen Haskell speaking or writing. And so it's going to say that the history of Babylonian nation, so it's going to speak about the history of Babylon as a nation. The history of Babylonian nation reveals to the one who searches for hidden principles. So, hidden reveals to the one who searches for hidden principles all that is necessary in order to understand the relation of earthly government. So those who study the history of Babylon as a nation, they need to understand the relation of earthly government, relation of earthly government the relation of government to God, and to God, the dealings of God with all the nations of the earth. Dealings of God with all the nations of the earth. Nations, sorry. Sorry. There, back. Sorry for that inconvenience. Yes, I was reading. The relation of earthly government towards God and the dealings of God with all the nations of the earth. Dealings of God with all the nations of earth. So you jump from that, you go downward, the same quote still. This is true because in Babylon is seen in some respects the highest developments of the plan of Satan. So in Babylon, seen highest development of plan of Satan. Here were counterfeited the principles of the heavenly kingdom, and so much of the metal was mingled with the alloy that an unusual strength was developed. So in Babylon, in a nutshell, what that says, what that mingling implies is the coming together of what? Church and state. That is what Stephen Askell refers to the here were the counterfeited principles of the heavenly kingdom, and so much of the true metal was mingled with alloy that an unusual strength was developed. So this is true metal mingled with alloy that an unusual strength was developed. So when the true metal mingled with was achieved is what? And in today's language, and when you redefine what church means, you would understand that it is culture and state. Done with the quotes. 6.1.3, the same book, SPP 61.3. I encourage that you go and read the entire of it. It is very interesting, I'll tell you. So, 61.3, people living in these last days, whether they be Christians or not, need not remain ignorant concerning their duty toward the civil government. So, no ignorance, no There is no. Yeah, there is no ignorance concerning their duty towards civil government. No ignorance to civil government. Nations cannot plead ignorance concerning their duty towards Christians. So this is human. And this is nations. So nations cannot plead ignorance concerning their duty towards Christians, towards their nations, nor towards God. So nations, no ignorance. No ignorance of nations towards Christians, and I'm changing that Christianity to humanity, because we are not dealing here. The history of the end of the world is not actually dealing with Christianity alone, but it is dealing with what? The entire humanity that is in this universe. So nations cannot lead ignorance of no ignorance of nations towards humanity. Towards other nations and towards God. So nations, they cannot plead or they cannot be ignorant towards humanity and towards other nations and towards what? God. The way nations deal with humanity, and humanity, I'm referring to human rights. The nations cannot plead ignorance when dealing ruthlessly with the aspect of, with the issues that are dealing with humanity. And so, the last one, 662.1 SDP 62.1. Nations have a time of probation, as do individuals. So what Haskell is doing is comparing what and what. Hello, come on. You cannot be quiet like that. Nation, let me read it again, and I understand some of you don't have the blue estates. So I'm going to read, you listen, and then you respond to what I'm asking, correct? Nations have a time of probation, as do individuals. What is Haskell doing? Is comparing what and what? Nations and individuals. So this quote is comparing nation on one side, and on the other side you have individuals or human. So, and what is the comparison? With the nations, they have what? Clause of probation. Nations have clause of probation, and the individuals, the same. So, sorry? Time of probation. Yes, not clause of probation. Thank you, Rogers. Time of probation. So, nations have a time of probation, as do individuals. So, when we will go to the alpha discussion of the king of the north, that is Babylon, it will have what? A time for probation, right? Yes. So I want us to discuss the rise and the fall of the king of the north, and we will begin with Babylon. So Babylon as the first king of the north, according to Daniel chapter 2. So we will begin looking at the rise and the fall of Babylon. And my understanding is that if you have a graph like this, and this is the rise, when you reach the peak, what happens? Come down. So this is what we will do with the kingdom of Babylon and the spiritual kingdom of Babylon here at the end of the world, which is the king of the north, USA in quotes. Are we there? Another thing that I was taught in the movement earlier when I joined is that when we were studying the last part of Daniel chapter 2, one principle that we identified with this part, this last part, this one wrong, with its two faces, what we saw was persecution. And what brought that persecution was the coming together of what? Church and state. And I was told that, so here at the end of the world, we're going to look for a nation that will bring together church and state. And when church and state come together, what happens? Persecution. But the problem with us now, we want to see people being chopped. We want to see mountains falling. We want to see what? Persecution, I understand it will be there, but the nature of persecution differs from the understanding we had of persecution in this history, in this king of the north. So we go to the history of Babylon as a nation. So we want to look at the rise and fall of Babylon. Rise and fall. One principle I've remembered that runs through in Daniel 2 is that these kingdoms, they conquer and become the king of the north. And after conquering and becoming the king of the north, they finally fall. So there is a rise and there is what? A fall. That is a principle that runs all through. So let's look at the rise and the fall of Babylon. So Daniel chapter 1, verse 1, in the third year of the reign of Joachim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, into Jerusalem and besieged it. So, what was the third year of Joachim? 606. So, in 606, something is going to happen according to Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. In the third year of the reign of King Joachim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, into Jerusalem and besieged it. So Jerusalem is going to be conquered by who? Babylon. So I don't know if that space will be enough, but I will try to. 646 BC. And Babylon is going to conquer Judah. Babylon. Judah or Jerusalem? Jerusalem. So, this is the point where Babylon is conquering, but before it conquers, it said we will consider what? The rise and the fall. So before it begins to fall, actually where it conquers, it is where it begins to fall. This is the point that it conquers, it rises, and it is going to fall. So before it rises to fall, we have to trace back its what? Its rise. Look how this thing works, this graph works. If we have X and Y, when X is rising, Y is going down. From prior to the rise of Babylon, we have Assyria, the kingdom of Assyria. And as the kingdom of Assyria is going down, rising up. This is a different color. This is Babylon. And this is Assyria. So as Assyria declines in strength, Babylon gains what? Strength and rises. So that brings us to the year 627 BC. In 627 BC, when we begin to trace the rise of Babylon as a kingdom of Bible prophecy, also the ministry of Jeremiah as a prophet of God begins this same year. So, the rise of Babylon and Jeremiah ministry begins. So, in Assyria, we mark two kings in 727 BC. We have two kings ruling in Assyria. And I have this one. This one. Some I know, some I so I leave it. I leave it. I know people will take a photo. So in 727 BC, we have these two kings in Assyria, and they're very difficult names. One is Asa and one is Sin. We have this one, and we have Sin. Sin Sarah. And this is a tail. And we mark, I use a different spell, isn't it? Because of this one. So the names you can add them, they're very difficult to pronounce. I don't know. You can look for their pronunciation. This first son, after their father died, they take the throne. The first son takes the throne, rules and dies. And after his death, this one is younger, also takes the throne, but because he's younger, he can't rule. they have an, how do you call it? They have an impositor, this eunuch person. So you have a eunuch. And so the eunuch is going to be in charge of the kingdom of Assyria because Sim, the son by the name Sim, is younger. He cannot take the throne. And so they trust the eunuch because eunuch is that person who cannot have a child. So they trust that eunuch because he's a person who cannot have a child, and so that means that he does not have a dynasty. Nobody from his posterity will come and take over the kingdom. So in 627 BC, Jeremiah ministry begins, and we have two kings, that is Asa and Sim, and they with an impositor. So 627 BC becomes the time of the end. Like in our history, the time of the end, 1989, we have two kings. We have that transition. We have Reagan. We have Reagan to Bush. That is the history of 727 BC in simple terms. In 626 BC, six to 626 BC, there is a revolution between the Babylonians and the Assyrians. And so the revolution between the Babylonians and the Assyrians, the Babylonians have their God, and the Assyrians, they have their God. And so there's this tension that whose God is going to prevail, whose God is going to become a giant, maybe to use such a word, at the end of the day, but to prevail is the most correct word to use. So in 626 BC, we mark a revolution. And that revolution, I've said, it entails Babylon, the religion of Babylon. So, religion of Babylon versus religion of Assyria. In 2001, in our histories, we mark a revolution. We have the counterfeit revolution and the revolution in the United States. Counterfeit revolution and the revolution in the USA. So that is the point between the religion of Babylon and the religion of Assyria. Babylonians have their god, I think, by the name Marduk, and the Assyrians have their god by the name Asa. I think this one was the name of their god. You can go and check. You go to see an alliance. In our line, this is 2014. So, in 614 BC, there is an alliance. 614, there is an alliance, and that alliance is between the Medes and the Babylonians, and they are against Assyria. So we are going to read. So we have an alliance between the Medes, the Babylonians. They are against Assyria. So the Medes, they conspire with the Babylonians, and they're going to become against who? Assyria. Babylon, they now have a backup. That Bible verse, I can't find it. I'll find it next time. Sorry? A question. 6:14. So it's not feasible. I know my handwriting is not that easy. Sorry for that. So in 614, there is this alliance between the Medes and the Babylonians, and they're going to be against the kingdom of Assyria. Sorry? You can speak up. Don't be quiet. You don't see, you say, I repeat it. The name of the Babylonian god, Marduk. That was the name of the Babylonian god. Has someone checked that of the Assyrians? I said it. Yes. Speak up. Speak up. Yes. This one here, 626. So in 626 BC, I said there is a Umaka revolution, and that revolution is this tension between the two religions. The religion of Babylon, they have a god, by the name, this one, Marduk, and the religion of Assyria, they have their god by the name, I think it's Astar, like that one of that sun. And so each faction is fighting for its religion to prevail. That was the revolution. That is the Nabopolassar and the king of Assyria. Nabopolassar was the king of Babylon and the king of Assyria. That was the revolution. Yes, it was about religion. Whose God should people follow? Is it the God of the Babylonians, or is it the God of the Assyrians? That was the battle. Have I answered you? Kosawa? Okay. So, pick 14 and alarm. I'm looking for that Bible verse. If you are there, you can give it to me. There is this alliance between the Medes and the Babylonians against the Assyrians. 14 BC. Anyone that Bible verse?
Isaiah chapter 13. Chapter 13, verse 17 to 18. Let me see if it's the one, but I'll give it at the end of the day. So 13, 17 to 18. Behold, I will stop the midst against them, which shall not regard. No, that is not the one. That will come later. That is when the midst are going to turn against Babylon. I look for that one. You remind me, I give it. So,
in 614 BC, the alliance between the Medes against the Babylonians. Six 2014. 612. People are speaking and I can't hear what you are speaking. You either ask or you keep quiet. Yes. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention that. So in 614, we have this alliance between the Medes and the Babylonians. And in 2014, we have different institutions. Remember, we are speaking about the king of the north, the spiritual king of the north here at the end of the world. So in 2014, we are going to mark institutions. Institutions that will bring the king of the north to power. So the myths, the application part of it will refer to this, the institutions that will bring the king of the north to power here at the end of the world. 612 BC. This is 2019 in our time, and 612 marks the fall of Nineveh. Nineveh was one of the capitals in the Assyrian kingdom. It wasn't the only capital, but it was this type of capital that the people of the Assyrians trusted so much and invested in. So in 612 BC, we mark the fall of Nineveh.
I'm going to read. So, 614 BC, we mark the fall of Nineveh, and the Babylonians and the Medes and the others, the other people, the Scythians, they're going to bring down the fall of Nineveh. And so, sorry. So I'm going to read. River Tigris, it flooded and broke the walls of Nineveh. And when the walls of Nineveh were broken, the attackers, they got a walk through in to that city, and that is how they conquered it. And so we're going to speak about River. Please. Sorry? I'm reading from Wikipedia. I'll give you the verse. I forgot to indicate them. I indicated them somewhere, but when I transferred, I forgot to indicate them. I'll give it. You remind me before I do the next class. That is what we will begin with, right? Yes. So, what was I reading? The fall of Nineveh. Napotea kidogo. Nineveh. I forgot to transfer from my notes, from my earlier notes. Six. Sorry, a minute, please. Just 1 minute. Then we turn to Nahum 1:1. Nahum 1:1. The burden of Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum, the Elokshite. God is jealous and the Lord revengeth. The Lord revengeth and is furious. The Lord will take vengeance on his adversaries and he reserveth wrath for his enemies. So that is Nahum 1:1. You can indicate it there. And there's another one. I'm going to chapter 3, verse 8, the same book. Chapter 3, verse 8, Nahum chapter 3, verse 8. It starts from verse 1. Woe to the bloody city! It is all full of lies and robbery, and prey departeth not. Verse 5, behold, I am against thee, said the Lord of hosts. I will discover thy skirts upon thy face, and I will shew the nations thy nakedness, and the kingdom thy shame, and will cast the abominable filth upon thee, and make thee vile, and I will set thee as the gazing stock. And it shall come to pass that all they that look upon thee shall flee from thee, and say, Nineveh is laid waste. Who will bemoan her? Whence shall I seek comforters for thee? Verse 8, art thou better than populars? No, that was situated among the rivers that had the waters around about it, whose rampart was the sea, and her wall was from the sea. So Nahum, you can read from Nahum 1 and 3. Nahum chapter 1 and Nahum chapter 3. Yes, so my time is up. I should stop there. We will pick up from next class. So you remind me, before I begin the next class, I should give you these verses. I have 5 minutes, okay, left. So I'll do the recap of what we've done today in our first class, and we will pick up from there next time. So I said, we began looking at the theme of the camp, pressing together, and the bond of union, which was parable methodology, and the advancement with light, that is advancing with parables as they develop in each dispensation in this reform line. And so said that the midnight prayer message comes, and the test shows that there is no Sabbath Sunday truth. The test was equality or gender equality. So Daniel 11, verse 1 to 9 is a natural history, and our spiritual history is Daniel 11, 40 to 45. And so we know that inspiration tells us that spiritual things are spiritually discerned, so the natural things are naturally discerned. And Isaiah 46, God declares the end from the beginning. The beginning is the natural history. We go back to natural history. That is what I believe that the Emma did in the morning. We should go back to old truths. And among the old truths we had is understanding of this natural history before we come to the understanding of the spiritual history. And so I said,
I'll be dealing with the king of the north and religion, define religion here at the end of the world, and understand how the Alpha history, which is Daniel 11, 40 to 45, USA becomes the king of the north in quotes. It's not the entire US. We are going to look at that history. And so, for us to understand the natural history, we went back to Daniel chapter 2. It brings Babylon as the first king of the north according to Daniel. But that does not mean that Babylon was the first king of the north. That is what I'm laboring to show, that Babylon was not the first king of the north. We had Assyria, Babylon conquered Assyria, became the king of the north, and Medo-Persia conquered Babylon, took the crown, became the king of the north, down to Rome. And we will look at how, here at the end of the world, USA will become the king of the north, because we don't see USA conquering and becoming the king of the north, unlike in Daniel 2, where we see wars. These are natural wars. And so we went to that reading of Stephen Haskell, going to speak about Babylon as a nation. We have hidden principles, the relation of the government, earthly governments towards God, how government should behave, how God expects government to carry themselves, and the dealings of God to nations of the earth. And in Babylon was seeing the highest developments of the plan of Satan. And that highest development of the plan of Satan was the true metal mingling with an alloy and becoming an unusual strength. And that, in today's language, we call it what? Church plus state. And in my discussion, I'm repeating that we don't have church and state. We will redefine what religion means, or what church here at the end of the world looks like. And so the nations, they cannot be ignorant towards the way they deal with humans, the way they deal with other nations, and the way they deal with ignorance, with God. They cannot close their eyes to these three elements: humanity, nations, and God. And finally, we read that the nations, they have a time for their probation. And we are looking at the rise and the fall of the king of the north, that is Babylon. We will continue from there next time. Shall we pray? And dear God, we want to thank you so much again this afternoon. Thank you because we are experiencing, we are living, looking into histories which the prophets of the Bible thought they could experience them at their fulfillment. But we are privileged, God, to see what is coming here at the end of the world. May we be wise unto salvation. May we use methodology correctly to arrive at correct answers, so that we may not draw wrong conclusions. We thank you so much for the prophetic word. Indeed, it's sweet when we live by its principles. We ask God that you continue guiding us through this camp. It has started till its end. And bless even those members who are online. We also pray for our friends who are not well, who were purposing to come, but because of one reason or the other, they have not. We ask for restoration of their health. Bless us, God. This is our prayer in Jesus' name.